The moon hung low over the forest, spilling silver light across the winding river. The night was quiet, save for the gentle rush of water and the distant hoot of an owl. Mist floated above the surface of the river, curling like smoke. Somewhere, deep in the woods, shadows moved, but no one noticed them except for Alara. She walked along the riverbank, her bare feet sinking slightly into the soft mud. Her hands clutched a small bundle of herbs. Useless now. Tears streaked her cheeks, glimmering in the moonlight. The village behind her slept, unaware of her grief. Her family had been gone for weeks, claimed by a curse no one could explain. And yet she had wandered here, drawn by a strange, aching need she did not understand. Alara stopped, staring at the water. It reflected her sorrow as clearly as a mirror. She whispered her pain to the river, hoping it might carry it away. Why did this happen to us? Why them? Why me? Her voice broke, trembling like the wind through the trees. The forest, however, was not empty. Hidden among the thick shadows, eyes glowed like molten amber. They followed her every move, patient and calculating. He had been watching her for hours, drawn by her sorrow and her courage alike. The Lycan King was not just a creature of the forest, he was its shadow, its roar, its command. And tonight, the river had called him to her. Alara shivered, thinking the wind had shifted. The growl came then, low and rumbling, almost from inside the earth itself. Her heart leapt into her throat, and she spun around. There, on the other side of the riverbank, a figure emerged from the shadows. He was enormous, tall and broad, cloaked in darkness and moonlight. Fur rippled across his skin where the moonlight caught, and his amber eyes burned with intensity. Every muscle in his body seemed alive with tension, like a predator ready to strike. Yet he did not move closer. Ilara's mouth opened, but no sound came. She wanted to run, but her legs felt rooted to the ground, as though the forest itself held her there. You. Why do you cry? His voice was deep, rough, like gravel, yet calm, with an undercurrent of authority that made her tremble. She whispered, unsure if it was her voice or the river answering. She looked away, ashamed. I lost. My family. They are gone. The Lycan King stepped closer, the shadows stretching around him. Gone, he repeated, his voice a growl now, but not threatening, curious, even sorrowful. And what of you? Will you also disappear? Ilara's tears fell freely now. I don't know, she said softly, clutching the herbs tighter. I feel lost. I feel like there is nothing left for me. He tilted his head, his ears flicking in the wind. His presence was overwhelming, powerful, and terrifying, yet strangely comforting. She realized, with a shock, that she was not afraid of him. Not entirely. Fear was there, yes, but there was also something magnetic in the way he looked at her, as if he could see her very soul, every hidden scar, every quiet longing. You belong with me now, he said suddenly, and the words were both a growl and a whisper, carrying across the river, like a command the wind itself obeyed. Alara staggered back. What do you mean? The Lycan King did not answer immediately. Instead, he crouched low, like a shadow folding over itself. His eyes never left hers. There was something ancient in them, something old as the forest and as dangerous as the full moon. The forest watches you, Alara, he said finally. It feels your sorrow. It knows your pain, and it has drawn me to you. You cannot stay among your kind, not when the curse is still near. Here, with me, you may live, but you must belong. Do you understand? Ilara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Part of her wanted to flee, run back to the village, and pretend none of this had happened. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, knew she could not. There was truth in his eyes. There was power in his presence, and perhaps, for the first time in weeks, a glimmer of hope. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "I don't know what you are. I don't know if I can trust." He straightened, towering over her. The wind stirred, brushing her hair across her face. "You have no choice," he said. But there was no cruelty in his words. Only certainty. "The curse does not forgive. The forest does not forgive. But I," his voice softened, almost imperceptibly, "I can protect you." Alara shivered. She wanted to protest, but she felt the weight of his truth pressing down, and she realized it was not a weight of fear, but of destiny. Somehow, her life had led her here, to this moonlit river, to this creature who was more than beast, more than king, more than legend. The air grew colder. Mist curled around them like fingers, and the river gleamed silver under the moon. The Lycan King's gaze pierced hers, and in that moment, Ilara understood. Her life would never be the same. She was no longer just a lost girl from a grieving village. She was now entwined with something old, powerful, and dangerous, something that could save her or destroy her. A sudden rustle in the trees snapped her attention to the forest behind her. Shadows moved quickly, and the Lycan King's growl deepened, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. Predators, drawn by her presence, were approaching. She could not see them clearly, but the danger was real. He stepped in front of her, muscles coiling, eyes flashing. He was a storm, held in flesh, ready to protect, ready to fight. And in that instant, Ilara realized that even if she wanted to flee, there was nowhere to go. She was caught between fear and fascination, terror and trust. "You will stay with me," he said again, and this time, his growl carried a promise. Protection, survival, and perhaps something more she could not yet name. Ilara swallowed hard. Her heart raced, her body frozen with uncertainty. Yet she could feel the pull of his presence, as surely as the river pulled at its own banks. Her tears fell, not just for her loss, but for the strange, unexplainable connection forming between them, one that she did not yet understand, and one that terrified her more than any curse ever could. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The river whispered over rocks and reeds, and the Lycan King waited, patient, commanding, unyielding. "You belong with me," he repeated, and this time, Ilara did not protest. Something inside her stirred a seed of courage, a spark of trust, and a hint of longing. She did not know what the future held, nor did she understand the full power of the creature before her. But one thing was certain: her life had changed forever, and there was no turning back. As the shadows of the forest pressed in, the moonlight glinting on his fur, Ilara felt the first shiver of destiny. Danger and hope were intertwined. Fear and desire danced together like the river's waves. And in the distance, a low growl rolled through the night, a warning, a promise, and a beginning. The Lycan King's amber eyes never left hers. The river whispered its secrets, and Ilara realized that the moment she had walked into the forest, her path had already been chosen. She belonged to the forest now, to the river, and to the Lycan King, and the night had only just begun. Ilara barely had time to catch her breath before the forest around them shifted. Shadows flickered in the corners of her vision, moving unnaturally fast. The Lycan King's growl rumbled low in his throat, a warning that made the ground beneath her feet vibrate slightly. She clutched the herbs in her hands, but their comforting scent did little to calm her racing heart. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice a mix of strength and something softer she could not name. Without waiting for her response, he leapt over the river in a single, fluid motion, landing silently on the other bank. His eyes, amber and glowing faintly in the moonlight, scanned the trees as if he could see the predators before they even appeared. Ilara hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, following him. Every instinct screamed that she should run, but the fear in the forest was nothing compared to the presence of the Lycan king beside her. There was safety in him, terrifying and raw, yet undeniably protective. The forest seemed endless, dark and tangled. Yet somehow, the Lycan king moved through it, as if he were born there. His strides were powerful, silent, and deliberate. Ilara stumbled at times, tripping over roots and rocks, but he never turned to scold her. Instead, he would pause, his gaze meeting hers, and in that look was something that told her, "You must survive." After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing. There, nestled between twisted trees and shimmering mist, was the Lycan king's den, a palace carved into the living rock of the forest, glowing with soft runes that pulsed like the beat of a heart. Stone statues of wolves and warriors lined the entrance, their eyes lifelike, almost watching. "You are safe here," he said, his voice calmer now, though still carrying an authority that made her instinctively straighten her back. "No curse or creature can touch you inside these walls. But there is more you must know." Ilara stepped inside, her eyes wide with awe. The palace was vast, larger than any building she had ever seen. The walls were carved with scenes of battles long past and creatures of the night. Soft lights glowed from enchanted crystals, casting shadows that danced across the floor like living things. She could feel the weight of history here, the whispers of time and magic pressing against her very soul. The Lycan king led her to a chamber filled with books, scrolls, and relics. He motioned for her to sit on a stone bench. She obeyed, her fingers brushing over the cold surface, feeling the rough texture. "The curse that haunts your village," he began, "is old, older than you can imagine. It was born from betrayal, anger, and pain. It feeds on loss and fear. Your family, they were its victims." His amber eyes softened as he studied her face. "And now, it seeks you." Ilara's heart clenched. She had always known the curse was more than stories, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel heavier, realer. "Then, why are you helping me?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Because I know what it is to be hunted by a curse," he said softly. "I have walked its shadow. I have felt its teeth at my neck. I know fear, and I know despair, and I know that no one should face it alone." Ilara swallowed, unsure if she should trust him. She wanted to run, wanted to return to her village and hide in the ruins of her life. But something about his words and his presence made her hesitate. There was truth in him, raw and undeniable. "I don't understand," she whispered. You are part of the forest. You are something else entirely. How can you help me?" He stepped closer, his form imposing yet oddly comforting. The amber of his eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Because," he said, "I am both what you fear and what you need. I am the shadow that will stand between you and the curse. And, perhaps, something more." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She did not know what he meant, but the look in his eyes sent a shiver through her. There was a depth of power, yes, but also longing, sorrow, and something she could not name. "You do not have to stay," he added suddenly, softer now, almost a whisper. "If you leave, the curse may find you. If you stay, you may learn strength you never knew." Ilara considered running, but she realized that for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. The world outside was cruel, unrelenting. The forest and the curse were not forgiving. But here, with him, she had a chance not just to survive, but to fight. She nodded slowly. "I will stay," she said. The words felt strange and powerful on her lips. The Lycan king's lips twitched in something like a smile, though his sharp teeth gleamed faintly in the light. Good, he said. There is much to teach you, and much to protect you from. The forest does not forgive mistakes. The curse is patient, but together we can face it. Days passed, and the forest became their world. Elara learned to move silently under the canopy, to read the signs of the wild, and to sense the unseen dangers that lurked in shadow. The Lycan King trained her, teaching her not with cruelty, but with firm guidance. Every lesson was a test of courage, resilience, and will. At night, he would watch over her as she slept, his amber eyes reflecting the glow of the runes. She often woke to find him silently sitting beside her, a silent guardian against the dark. There was a tension in these moments, a quiet pull, an unspoken connection that neither dared to name. She feared it, yet longed for it. One evening, as the moon rose high and painted the forest in silver and shadow, Elara stood at the edge of the river once more. She remembered the night she had first come here, trembling and lost. Now, she felt different, stronger, braver, and yet deeply aware of the presence behind her. "You have grown," he said from the shadows, his voice a soft rumble that made her turn. He stepped into the moonlight, the silver gleaming off his fur. He was both terrifying and magnificent, a creature of the wild and of legend. But there is more ahead. The curse is not yet done. It waits, and it tests those it hunts most cruelly. Elara met his gaze, her chest tight with fear, and something else, a strange, undeniable longing. I am ready," she whispered, though her voice shook. He studied her, his amber eyes searching hers. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps you are only beginning to see the truth. Courage is not absence of fear. It is the strength to face it." Then, as if the forest itself heard his words, a rustling came from the trees behind them. Shadows moved unnaturally fast. Elara froze, and the Lycan King's growl rolled through the clearing, low and dangerous. "They have found us," he said, his voice steady, but the muscles in his jaw and shoulders tensed. "Predators of the curse. They sense your presence, your blood, and they are coming for you." Elara's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to run, but she knew now that there was only one place she could be safe. She turned to him. "Then, I stay with you," she said, her voice firm, steady, despite the fear creeping into her bones. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement. And then, with a single motion, he transformed. His body shifted, muscles rippling, fur growing, claws extending. The Lycan King became the shadowy, magnificent wolf he truly was. Yet his eyes, the amber eyes, remained, full of intelligence, warmth, and something unspoken that made Elara's heart ache. Together, they faced the darkness moving through the trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The river whispered its secrets. And for the first time since her family was lost, Elara did not feel entirely alone. But the danger was not over. The shadows advanced, and the night promised tests, trials, and choices that would define both their fates. Elara clenched her fists, feeling the power of the Lycan King beside her, and whispered a prayer to the river. "I will not be afraid," she promised, though her heart raced with the unknown. The Lycan King's growl answered her silently, a vow and a warning all at once, and in the depths of the forest, where moonlight and shadow danced together, the first true battle of their journey had begun. The forest was alive with whispers that only the wind could carry. Shadows shifted around the trees, and every rustle made Elara's heart race. The predators of the curse were still out there, hidden among the undergrowth, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Beside her, the Lycan King moved like a shadow made flesh. His amber eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, scanning the trees and riverbanks with unerring precision. Elara tried to match his movements, crouching low, keeping silent, her heartbeat steadying only slightly with each step. The training he had given her over the last days, how to move without sound, how to read the forest, how to sense danger, kept her from stumbling. But fear was still close behind. "You are stronger than you believe," the Lycan King said, his voice quiet, but full of power. "The forest recognizes it. The curse will recognize it soon enough. But remember this: strength alone will not save you." Alara looked up at him, her chest rising and falling with effort. "Then what will?" she asked. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, carried away by the night air. "The bond between us," he said simply. "Trust and courage, together. That is what will protect you. You are learning more than survival. You are learning to rely on something, someone. You cannot fight alone." Alara's gaze fell to the river, moonlight shimmering on its surface. The thought of trust, of relying on him, sent a shiver down her spine. She had never known such a thing, always independence, always the solitude of grief. Yet here, beside this creature who was both terrifying and magnificent, she felt something new. A spark of connection, of understanding, and even longing. For days, they moved through the forest, tracking signs of the curse and hunting its shadows. The Lycan King was patient, guiding her, testing her limits, teaching her to control fear rather than be ruled by it. At night, they would rest by the river, sharing quiet moments in the silver glow of the moon. It was during one such night that Alara first truly noticed him, not as a predator, not as a king, but as a being who had lived, suffered, and carried pain beyond measure. He sat close, just outside the reach of her sleeping space, his eyes fixed on the stars reflected in the water. "Do you ever wish to be free of this?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. The Lycan King's gaze did not waver from the reflection. "Every day," he admitted, "I am bound to this form, to this forest, to the curse that took me from the world I once knew. I am trapped, and yet there is purpose in it, as there is in guiding you, as there is in protecting you." Alara's breath caught. There was sorrow in his voice, but also an honesty that made her heart ache. "You are not just a monster," she whispered. You are something else entirely. Something noble." He finally turned to her, his amber eyes softening. The moonlight glinted on his fur, and for a moment, he seemed less beast, less king, and more human. "Noble?" he repeated, a faint rumble in his throat. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I am simply aware of what it means to lose someone, to watch them be taken by a force beyond your control. And now, I see the same in you. I see courage and fear and longing, all in one." Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks, and she looked away. She had never been praised in this way. She had never been seen so clearly. The pull of his presence was overwhelming, drawing her closer despite the fear that still lingered in her heart. Days passed, and their bond deepened. They learned to anticipate each other's movements, to trust instinct, as much as training. The forest became less a place of fear and more a world in which they existed together, bound by necessity, by danger, and now, by an unspoken connection neither dared to name aloud. Then came the night of the first true test. A whisper of movement on the wind alerted them both. Alara froze, sensing the familiar tension ripple through the Lycan King's muscles. His growl was low, almost a vibration through the earth, warning of predators approaching fast. "They are close," he murmured. "We cannot hide this time. We must face them." Alara nodded, gripping a wooden staff he had given her, its tip tipped with silver from the river rocks. Fear burned in her chest, but she steadied herself. She had learned courage, yes, but also the weight of trust. And she would not face this alone. The first shadow lunged from the trees, a creature twisted by the curse, its eyes red and hollow. The Lycan King moved like lightning, intercepting it with a swipe of his massive claws. Elara followed instinct, swinging her staff to strike at another. She stumbled at first, but then remembered his lessons: calm, observe, strike. The creature fell, disappearing into the mist, and she felt a surge of power and relief. "Good," the Lycan King said, his eyes never leaving the dark shapes emerging from the forest. "You are learning fast. But remember, we are still outnumbered." More shadows emerged, their movements coordinated and relentless. The fight was chaotic, a blur of motion, fear, and instinct. Elara moved as he had taught her, trusting him to anticipate the dangers she could not yet see. And he, in turn, moved to protect her, placing himself between her and the creatures with a ferocity that made her chest ache, not with fear, but with something deeper, something she could not yet name. When the last shadow fell, silence returned. The forest was still, except for the whisper of the river and their heavy breathing. Elara's legs shook as she sank to the ground, exhausted but alive. "You did well," the Lycan King said, his voice rough but soft. He approached her, kneeling so that his massive form was close but not overwhelming. "Better than I expected." Elara looked up at him, her chest rising and falling with effort. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Her voice was barely audible, carried away by the river's song. He studied her for a long moment, amber eyes intense. "No," he said finally. "You could have. You did. Because you trusted. Because you learned. Because you were brave enough to stand here, beside me, when fear wanted to push you away." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The forest seemed to pause. The river held its song, and the moonlight painted them both in silver. And then, something shifted. The air between them seemed to thrum, alive with an emotion neither fully understood: fear and courage, trust and longing, danger and connection. They all collided, leaving Elara dizzy, yet aware of the strange, intimate bond forming. "You," she began, her voice trembling. "You are not what I thought you would be." He tilted his head, a small, almost human smile flickering. "A monster," she whispered. And yet, as the words left her lips, she realized they were no longer fully true. He was a monster. Yes, but he was also something far more. Something noble, fierce, and... The night deepened around them, shadows stretching and retreating with the sway of the trees. And Elara knew that her life, her fears, her courage, and her heart were now all bound to this creature beside her. But as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the forest whispered another warning. A distant howl, unnatural and chilling, echoed through the trees. The Lycan King's ears twitched, his body coiling like a spring. "They are coming," he said, his voice low and tense. "Something worse than before, and they will not stop until they have claimed what they seek." Elara's stomach twisted with fear, but she stood taller, gripping her staff. She was no longer the lost girl who cried by the river. She was a fighter, a companion, and now, a part of something greater than herself. Another sand. The Lycan King stepped beside her, towering and magnificent. And for the first time, his gaze held not just power and warning, but something else entirely: trust, respect, and a promise. "Whatever comes," he said softly, "we face it together. The curse will test us, the forest will test us, and perhaps, so will our hearts." Elara swallowed, her lips trembling. "Together," she agreed, her voice firm, despite the fear in her chest. The wind carried their promise into the trees, into the river, and into the depths of the forest. Shadows stirred, and the howl came again, closer this time, more dangerous, more determined. And in that moment, Elara understood that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was standing beside the Lycan king, facing the unknown, and trusting that together they could endure anything, even the darkness within and without. The night was far from over. The forest trembled under the weight of approaching danger. The howl from before had multiplied, echoing through the trees, carrying with it the promise of relentless pursuit. Shadows moved faster now, creeping toward the clearing where Elara and the Lycan king stood, their forms illuminated by the pale moonlight. Elara gripped her staff tightly. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had come a long way since the night she first cried by the river. She was no longer the frightened healer from the village. She was a fighter, a survivor. And now, something even more extraordinary. A partner to the Lycan king in both courage and purpose. Beside her, he shifted, muscles rippling beneath his fur. His amber eyes scanned the trees, calculating and fierce. He was a creature of the night, a king among shadows. Yet in the presence of the danger that approached, there was a restraint in him, a careful control that spoke of wisdom born from centuries of struggle. "They are stronger this time," he murmured, his voice low, almost a growl. "The curse. It tests more than courage. It tests trust. It tests hearts." Elara nodded, swallowing hard. "Then, we face it together," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. The moment their eyes met, she felt the bond between them tighten, an unspoken promise of reliance and trust that went beyond words. The shadows emerged from the forest like a living tide. Twisted forms, dark and writhing, advanced with a hunger that made the air thick with tension. Elara could sense their intent. They sought not just to harm her, but to feed on fear itself. The Lycan king stepped forward, his form shifting seamlessly from man to wolf. His growl rolled through the clearing, resonating deep within the ground. He became a living storm of power and agility, a guardian forged by the forest itself. "Stay close," he commanded. And Elara obeyed instinctively. She moved with him, matching his steps, trusting his guidance as they met the first wave of shadows. Her staff struck true, the silver tip shining in the moonlight as it connected with the creatures. One fell, disappearing into the mist. Another lunged, and she twisted just in time, narrowly avoiding its claws. The battle raged around them, a blur of motion and sound. Elara felt fear, yes, but also a fierce exhilaration. She was no longer alone. With the Lycan king at her side, she could face the impossible. Every strike she made, every movement she took, was mirrored by his presence. Together, they were stronger than any shadow, any curse. Then, a deeper shadow emerged, larger, darker, and more menacing than the others. It was the heart of the curse, a twisted reflection of the forest's pain and malice. The Lycan king's growl deepened, a warning to Elara and to the shadow alike. "This is it," he said, his voice low, fierce. "This is the source, and it will test us like nothing before." Elara felt a chill run through her. The shadow pulsed with an energy that made the air hum. She could feel its intent, its hunger, its relentless malice. And yet, standing beside the Lycan king, she did not falter. "Remember what I taught you," he said. "Trust, courage, together." The shadow lunged, and the Lycan king met it head-on, claws flashing, teeth bared. Elara moved in tandem, striking with precision, using the techniques he had drilled into her. The clash of light and shadow was chaotic, terrifying, and yet beautiful in its intensity. For a moment, the battle seemed endless, a storm without calm. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, Ilara felt it a connection not just to him, but to the forest, to the river, to the very pulse of the world around them. She realized that courage was not simply facing fear. It was believing in the bond they shared, the trust that had grown between them in the moonlit nights and shadowed woods. She moved closer to the Lycan King, her hands steady, her heart focused. "Together," she whispered. He met her gaze, and in that moment, their strength merged. The Lycan King shifted, not entirely into wolf, nor fully human, but into a form that balanced both the fierce, powerful guardian and the man capable of trust and love. Amber eyes locked on the shadow. He lunged with renewed force, Ilara beside him, her staff glowing faintly with the magic of the river and the forest. The shadow recoiled, struggling against the combined strength and trust of the two. Every strike, every movement, was not just physical, it was a bond, a proof that courage and trust could overcome darkness. Finally, with a cry that echoed through the trees, the shadow dissipated, leaving behind only mist and silence. The forest seemed to exhale, the river glimmered in relief, and the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. Ilara sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. The Lycan King lowered himself beside her, shifting back to his human form. His amber eyes softened as he studied her. And for the first time, he allowed himself to show the depth of relief and admiration he felt. "You have done more than survive," he said, his voice low and filled with awe. "You have faced the curse, faced the darkness, and you have stood beside me. You are remarkable." Ilara looked up at him, breathless, and realized that the fear she had felt for so long was gone, replaced by something new: pride, trust, and a strange, unspoken warmth. "We did it," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face despite the exhaustion. He reached out, gently lifting a strand of hair from her face. "No," he said softly. "You did it. And in doing so, you have changed more than the forest. You have changed me." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. The bond between them had grown through fear, trust, and battle. Now, in the quiet aftermath, it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. She realized that the Lycan King, for all his strength and ferocity, had become vulnerable in her presence, not weak, but open, capable of feeling and trusting again. For the first time since she had come to the forest, Ilara felt at peace. She had faced loss, fear, and darkness, yet she had found courage, connection, and perhaps something even greater: love. They walked to the river together, the first light of dawn painting silver on the water. Ilara knelt beside it, letting her fingers brush the surface. The river reflected her face, calm and determined. And beside it, the Lycan King stood, watching with eyes full of respect and something tender she could not name. "You have grown," he said, finally, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Stronger, braver, and yet, more human than I expected. Perhaps the curse was not only a punishment, perhaps it was a path to this moment." Ilara turned to him, her heart full. "Perhaps," she agreed, "and I am glad it brought me to you." The Lycan King's eyes softened, and he stepped closer. The air between them seemed to thrum with quiet power. "And I am glad it brought me to you," he said, his voice low, sincere, and steady. They stood together in the glow of the rising sun, two beings of different worlds, bound by trust, courage, and an unspoken bond that had been forged in darkness and strengthened in light. The forest around them was quiet, the shadows retreating, as if acknowledging that the trial was over for now. Yet, in the distance, the river whispered secrets, and the wind carried hints of future trials. The curse was not gone completely. The forest still held dangers, shadows still lingered. But for the first time, Ilara and the Lycan King understood something vital. Together, they could face anything. Together, they were stronger than fear, stronger than darkness, stronger than any curse. And as they walked along the riverbank, side by side, Ilara felt a new certainty in her heart. The Lycan King was no longer just a creature of the forest, no longer just a guardian or a legend. He was her companion, her protector, and perhaps something more. The sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the trees and river. The mist lifted, revealing a forest transformed, alive with possibility. Ilara smiled, feeling the warmth of the morning and the strength of the bond they shared. The Lycan King's amber eyes met hers, and in that gaze was a promise of protection, of trust, and of a future where fear no longer ruled. The curse had tested them. The forest had tested them, and they had endured. Together, they had triumphed. The river flowed endlessly, carrying whispers of the past and dreams of the future. Ilara reached out, taking the Lycan King's hand, and for the first time, she felt completely unafraid. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The night of tears, shadows, and fear was over. The forest, the river, and the bond between them all held a single truth. Courage, trust, and love could conquer even the darkest of curses. And for the Lycan King and Ilara, the journey was only just beginning.